Hello friends and welcome to the weekly Waffle, the Sunday breakfast show where we talk about a subject hobby related at great length in quite a waffly way and then end the show by asking you some questions about that subject. And today I want to talk about alternatives, which is, I'm sure you're aware by this point, a theme for the channel. We've gone over alternatives to Games Workshop products, for example, fairly extensively. And even done a revisit on that where we also brought up some additional alternatives. And the inspiration for today is actually, it came really suddenly, not long before recording this. I tend to record this last minute anyway to give me the most week to see what I want to talk about. So this is always a bit of a last minute thing. But today's was literally this morning where I sort of was like, that's the subject I should cover this week. So we're talking about alternatives. Obviously, there's a lot of them out there. If you want to play 40k or Age of Sigmar, for example, One Page Rules has Grimdark Future and Age of Fantasy. They also have alternatives to all of Games Workshop's mainline games, actually, which is quite interesting. But in particular, those two. And they're not the same thing. I would say that they're both far more geared towards casual players. Warhammer players will probably see them as lacking in depth, which is not necessarily true. There's a lot of strategic and tactical depth still there. There's just not a lot of weight of rules. So this is a bit of an unfortunate thing. In broader game design, that wouldn't be considered depth. That would be considered almost overcomplication or sort of poor delivery of rules. But Warhammer players tend to like it. So I have criticised it in the past, and I realise I shouldn't really criticise it, or at least I should try and frame it a bit better when I criticise it, because whilst it may be, in the broader world of miniature wargames, considered to be poor game design to have that many individual rules, that widespread, over so many books, a lot of Warhammer players just like it. And so, like, what's the point in criticising it? Well, it doesn't do anything. You're not going to change someone's mind by saying, this thing that you really like is bad game design. No one's going to change their mind because of that. What people need to do is try alternatives, and the only way they're going to know how they actually feel about Games Workshop games is if they try alternatives, right? If you only have ever played Games Workshop games, which I believe is true for the vast majority of the active Games Workshop player base, if you've only ever played Games Workshop games, you can't actually know if you like Games Workshop games, really, or at least you can't know if you prefer them. You can certainly know if you like them, but you have no way of comparing to the entire rest of the miniature wargaming market, which is huge. Like, we tend to think of alternatives as being like, or again, should I say, stalwart Games Workshop fans tend to think of alternatives as being like off-brand, almost, or store brand. And I've even had people say this, you know, that non-GW branded stuff sort of comes over a bit knockoffy or a bit off-brand. And that's so absurd to me, because obviously I mostly play non-GW stuff, and I tend to find that the quality of the publications, the quality of the rules writing, the quality of the community management is all so much higher than in GW games, and that's exactly why I prefer them. And of course, I've played both, so I get to make that comparison. I get to make that decision because I've played a bunch of non-GW games and like 25, 30 years of GW games. So we kind of need to be able to encourage stalwart GW fans to try other stuff so that they can know where their preferences lie. And I say we need to. We don't need to. You don't need to persuade people to play other games. Like, if they don't want to play them, they don't want to play them. And it's not anyone's business to tell them that they should or shouldn't. But that can be true equally in a world where if you're enthusiastic for and have a joy and a passion for other non-GW games, and you want to encourage other people to try them because you feel that they are fulfilling, wonderful play experiences that they'll get a lot from, then there's nothing wrong with trying to encourage people to try non-GW games. So, alternatives. There are loads of them. Most of them we would call alternatives to Games Workshop, which was why, that's the point of that whole 5 minutes of establishing Ramble, is that the vast majority of alternatives out there are alternatives to Games Workshop games. But, at the same time, not all of them. And I discovered one today that's really piqued my interest. So, I've spoken a few times on the channel about Battletech. Like, I really wanted to get into it. I was so enthusiastic when I first discovered it. And the thing that killed my keen was that for like 5 months straight, there was just no stock of the miniatures in the UK. And I know that you can use 3D printables. I know the game is minis agnostic. You can use cotton bobbins if you want to. You can use anything, coins. But for me, immersion is super important in games. It's one of the reasons why I've strayed from 40k recently, because I feel like the immersion of 40k is at an all-time low. Just bonked my table. And because immersion is so important to me, having those lovely, crispy, official miniatures that have the visual direction that the game's creator wants to put out into the world is important to me. So the reason I don't proxy is not because I have any problem with proxy, and if you want to proxy, by all means, absolutely. The reason I personally don't proxy is because I want the physical game in front of me that I'm playing to communicate the creator's vision, because that's what helps me with my immersion. So it's a personal thing, but that's what put me off of Battletech. That's why I didn't end up getting into it. So this morning, I discovered Gamma Wolves, which is by Ash Barker and is published by Osprey. If you don't know who Ash Barker is, I'll put a link to his YouTube channel, Guerrilla Miniature Games, in the description. He's quite a big YouTube hobby channel, and he's been a real champion for a lot of the games that I love over the years. He's got loads of series on Infinity, loads on Battletech. He does a lot of stuff with the Osprey games. So it makes sense that he would be the person to publish a game through Osprey, and it makes sense that he would do a miniatures agnostic game, which Gamma Wolves is. You can use whatever miniatures you want. What's really interesting about it is the things that it's combining. We've got... So the line of sight system it uses is like the volumetric line of sight that Infinity uses, where instead of it being true line of sight in the sense of if any part of your model can see any part of their model, you have line of sight. It's what Infinity does is it uses a silhouette system where the model is, for line of sight purposes, represented by a cylinder that is the width of its base and a fixed height. And Gamma Wolves is doing that. So they're using this volumetric line of sight. This solves so many problems and arguments when it comes to line of sight, because you cannot model for advantage in a game that uses that system. As long as the base size that the model has to be on is dictated by the rules, and as long as the height of its line of sight cylinder is dictated by the rules, you cannot ever model for advantage or disadvantage. And that is brilliant. It's so genius. It's one of the things about Infinity that made me go, wow, these guys are really turned on. Like, they really understand what the stupid little arguments in war games are that need to be fixed. So Ash using that for Gamma Wolves, very, very smart. Really love it. At the same time, he's using a dice pool system, not a stat modifier system. So advantages add more dice to your pool, negative modifiers take dice away from your pool, which they describe as it should make it easier for you to memorize what you need to be rolling and when, and not have to consult the book as often. I agree. Systems like that, they do tend to make it a lot easier to commit combat math and combat systematics to memory without needing to check the book. So love it, love the sound of it. And it just solves so many of the problems that I had with Battletech. It's quicker to play. And before we get into this, Battletech fans watching this, I know that things like Alpha Strike and the beginner box exist. I'm going to be doing more of an in-depth comparison of this at a later date. But it's quicker to play. You can obviously just create your own visual identity using whatever miniatures you want, which is, again, something I love about miniatures agnostic games, is that because there isn't a design philosophy coming from the creator, you're more encouraged to create your own thing. And that makes it easier for my brain to be immersed in that situation. And just systematically, it looks really clean. Like I say, I am going to do an in-depth review of this. I've actually bought the book for it. It's only $12.99 as well for the rulebook. And as far as I can gather, being an Osprey game, you just need the rulebook because it's miniatures agnostic, and all you need other than that is D6s and tape measure. So that's really cool. But I'm going to, learn the rules first and try and at least have a game or two of it. I've recently managed to talk my partner into playing Aristea with me, which is a fantastic board game from Corvus Belli, and now that I've sort of got her playing that, I might be able to talk her into play testing some other games with me, depending on how light they are. I'm hoping that Gamma Wolves might be one that's light enough that she feels like she would enjoy play testing that with me. At the end of the day, you don't want to pressure people into playing any kind of games that they wouldn't enjoy. But yeah, more in-depth is coming. But it goes to show that the world of alternatives even extends beyond alternatives to Games Workshop. It's not just about sticking it to Games Workshop. It's about saying, as a publisher, as a game designer, I recognise these issues that players have with games, and I want to try to create a game that doesn't have those issues. And that's actually a really cool thing, because that is something entirely for the community. There's no other reason to do it. Like, no one's doing it to get rich. None of these alternate game makers are dominating the market with their game. They're doing it because they look at the fan base and they say, what are your complaints? They listen to those complaints and they say, okay, I think I've got an idea for how I can fix that for you. And they give you a game that tries to remove those complaints. And I think that's beautiful. And that's one of the reasons I embrace alternative game systems so strongly. In my case, it's ended up being a lot of alternatives to Games Workshop games because for almost my entire life, I just played Games Workshop games. But for you, that might not be the case. If you're a Battletech player and the grindiness and the fastidiousness of Battletech is a bit much for you at the moment, maybe Gamma Wolves is perfect for you. Maybe you want to tune into the review when I do it. But here are my questions. We always end this on questions. We are coming up to the finish mark now. So here are my questions. What alternative games have been exciting for you this year? What alternative games have you picked up? Have you looked into? Have you considered? Could be Beyond the Gates of Antares, could be Kings of War, could be Drop Fleet Commander, could be Gamma Wolves indeed. Silver Bayonet is due to come out soon. That's got a lot of people excited. There's so many to choose from. It's such a vast world. Moonstone is another really cool one that I'd like to do a review on at some point. So tell me, which alternative games have you either picked up, looked into, but regardless are exciting you? That's what I want to know. Which of these alternate games are exciting you? Which are the ones that you think cannot be missed? My other question, and this one's a little bit more for the technically minded people, is which of these alternative games do you think single-handedly addresses major wargaming problems? For me, it would be Infinity, obviously. Very clean, centralised distribution of information, lots more symmetry, which pulls the game together and makes it far more competitive, far less swingy, far less prone to turn one ruffle stomp a la every major 40k tournament recently. And that genius line of sight system, both players being active at once, so no one stood around bored forever. You actually have to both play the game at the same time. All of those things, I think, are all major problems with war games in general. Not just GW, for everyone that thinks that I like to just have a go at GW, not just GW. War games in general, I think a lot of them suffer from all of the problems that Infinity fixes. So that's the one that's, for me, the big one. But what's your big one? So, which alternatives are you excited about? Which alternative game do you think solves the most problems in wargaming? Those are the questions for this week. That is 15 minutes of Weekly Waffle. We're going to go just a tiny hair over. Just as I say, don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, don't forget to enable notifications, don't forget to check the links below if you wish to support the content that I create here on YouTube. And I will see you on Wednesday with a new main video. And then the weekend after that, you will not get a waffle because it's Christmas weekend. So